Right, this is Karen Dial with Hungry Sheep, and we have Jonathan Edwards, Resolution 61 through 70. Number 61, resolved. I will not give way to that apathy and listlessness which I find artificially eases and relaxes my mind from being fully and fixedly set on God's grace. Whatever excuses I may have for it, whatever my listlessness inclines me to do, or rather whatever it inclines me to neglect doing, I will realize that it would actually be best for me just to do these things. Here we have Jonathan Edwards using a word that would come often in his descriptions of himself in his worst moments. This listlessness, this lack of energy, perhaps depression, perhaps we would call it brain fog, perhaps we would call it chronic fatigue in our modern world. He says the word excuses in this resolution. Does he mean something physical? Does he mean headaches or stomach aches or general sense of the muscles are so difficult to move? What does he mean? But what we do know from this resolution is that he intends to fight listlessness and not give in to it. But he says when he finds himself in this state, he's going to commit to do it anyway. The body in motion remains in motion. So he is committing to fight listlessness. He commits to not let apathy rule the day. Number 62, resolved. Never to do anything but what God, by the law of love, requires me to do. And then, according to Ephesians 6 through 8, I must do it willingly and cheerfully, as unto the Lord and not for man. I must remember that whatever good thing any man has or does, he has first received from God. And that whenever a man is compelled by faith to act with love and charity toward others, especially those in need, that we do it as unto the Lord. This law of love expression is often used in this time period for loving your neighbor as yourself. And here we have Jonathan Edwards, and he's referencing the verses in Ephesians that he says he will love his neighbor, and he intends to do it as if working for the Lord. So it says, obey them not only to win their favor when their eye is on you, but as slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from your own heart. Serve wholeheartedly as if you were serving the Lord, not people, because you know that the Lord will reward each of you for whatever good they do, whether they are slave or free. He's using this verse to say that he will serve the people, serve those in need, as if he is actually doing the work for the Lord. And he also believes that the reward is here. As stated in this verse, he believes that this reward will come from the Lord as he does these charitable works. Number 63, on the hypothetical supposition that at any one time there was never to be but one individual in the world who was a genuine and complete Christian, who in all respects always demonstrated the faith shining in its truest luster and appearing excellent and lovely. From whatever angle and under whatever circumstances this faith is viewed, resolved to act just as I would do if I strove with all my strength to be that one, and to live as if that one should live in my time and place. I think it's easy to get the wrong idea from this resolution, as if Jonathan Edwards is somehow saying, what if he was the last Christian because everyone else is so given away to their own sin? That's not his point here. His point is, how would I behave if I was the only one on earth demonstrating Jesus Christ to others? How would I behave if I were the last witness to a dying world? And so this changes your whole perspective. If you're the only witness of Jesus Christ, how much more serious are you about your holiness? How much more serious are you about telling the truths of Scripture? How much more serious are you if everything came down to just your witness? Number 64, resolved. Whenever I experience those groanings which cannot be uttered, as in Romans 8:26, of which the apostle speaks, and those longings that consume our souls, of which the psalmist speaks in Psalm 119:20. I will embrace them with everything I have within me, and I will not be weary of earnestly endeavoring to express my desires, nor of the repetitions so often necessary to express them and benefit from them. So here Jonathan Edwards says that he's going to embrace these times of groanings, without words. And he references Romans 8:26. It says, "In the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit himself intercedes through us, wordless groans." And here Jonathan Edwards is actually referring to a state of his soul, a condition of groaning. And he's not the only evangelist, the only pastor, the only spiritual individual to say that groanings are a part of their prayer. And he's saying that he's going to give in to these times and to fully embrace them for their benefit. We can only imagine the desperation he felt to see the souls converted within his congregation. And then now we can look back and say, indeed, these prayers were not for naught, for much has come of it. In fact, the First Great Awakening, the catalyst was Jonathan Edwards. Perhaps the catalyst was not his preaching. Perhaps the catalyst was found in these groanings, these longings, these desires, these repetitions he speaks of in this resolution as a 19-year-old. He also references in this resolution Psalm 119:20. "My soul is consumed with longing for your laws at all times." So Jonathan Edwards is saying that at times his soul is completely consumed. This idea that your soul is consumed with the holiness of the Lord, this is really unusual speaking in our modern time period. How often are we consumed with that which God would want for this world? Number 65, resolved to exercise myself in my whole life long with the greatest openness I am capable of, to declare my ways to God and lay open my soul to Him. All my sins, temptations, difficulties, sorrows, fears, hopes, desires, and everything in every circumstance. Here referencing Dr. Manton's sermon, Psalm 119. So in this resolution, Jonathan Edwards references a sermon by Dr. Manton, a theologian of the 1600s. And this sermon would be on Psalm 119:26. It reads, "I gave an account of my ways, and you answered me. Teach me your decrees." So again, this is Jonathan Edwards reaching for that desire to lay his heart open before the Lord, to confess all, to be completely transparent before God, and believing that he would receive an answer and that he himself would be taught by God. And this sermon by Dr. Manton, he would go into 3 logical points from this one verse. From this one verse, we have the concept that, number 1, be honest before God and completely transparent. Number 2, you have the promise to believe that he hears you. And number 3, you have the promise to believe that he will actually teach you. This concept of laying your soul open before the Lord was incredibly important to Jonathan Edwards, and he knew it was the absolute foundation for his ministry. Number 66, resolved. I will endeavor always to keep a gracious demeanor, an air of acting and in speaking in all places and in all companies, except if I should so happen that faithfulness requires otherwise. Again, we have this desire for a gracious demeanor. Why? Because I'm sure he struggled with not having a gracious demeanor. I'm sure he struggled with impatience. I'm sure he struggled with being about his own business and his own calling instead of really engaging with those right in front of him. But he must commit to otherwise. And here, as a 19-year-old, he indeed does just that. He commits to a gracious demeanor. But at the end of this resolution, he gives himself a bit of an out. He says, if faithfulness requires otherwise, then graciousness is not my top priority. So here he's essentially trying to balance the task of being faithful to the Lord with the need for polite, gracious, and kind conversation with others. Number 67, resolved, after afflictions, to inquire in what ways am I now the better of having experienced them, What good have I received by them? What benefits and insights do I now have because of them? So here, another brilliant mental exercise and fruitful mental exercise of Jonathan Edwards, that when you suffer affliction, you are to ask yourself, ask the Lord, what have I gained from this? Lord, what is your purpose in this affliction? How shall I have fruit in my life from this suffering? What have I learned in my illness? What have I learned in my sorrow? What have I gained in my grief? He looks at affliction as if brought from the Lord for a purpose, and there is good to come from it. Although Jonathan Edwards doesn't reference Romans 8:28 in this resolution, it seems as if he is committed to it. It says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." So he asked himself, what is this good that God has brought through this affliction? Number 68, resolved to confess honestly to myself all that I find in myself, whether weakness or sin. And if it is something that concerns my spiritual health, I will also confess the whole case to God and implore him for all needed help. Here, Jonathan Edwards is committing to confess all of his sins before the Lord, to be transparent before God. Let me just read a psalm. He didn't reference this, but I think it's so applicable here. Psalm 32:5. I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not cover my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the iniquity of my sin. Jonathan Edwards knew that transparency, honesty before the Lord, to lay the soul open, was absolutely essential for himself and his ministry. Number 69, resolved always to do that which I will wish I had done whenever I see others do it. Here, this is Jonathan Edwards taking another humble posture, that he can learn from others by observing their good works, their good actions and behavior. He desires to imitate it. I'm sure among the graduates of Yale and the young pastors he was familiar with, there was this tendency to compare, etc. But Jonathan Edwards says, no, I'm not going to compare to bring myself down or compare to try to elevate myself. I'm going to compare that I may be a greater servant for the Lord. And number 70, let there be something of benevolence in all that I speak. In Jonathan Edwards' last resolution, is it not fitting that a man of words would have this resolution, that all he says would have something of benevolence to it? All that he speaks would have a goodness to it. This is his commitment, and indeed his words of goodness are spoken and read and studied throughout the ages, even through entire libraries devoted to his thoughts. The man of words would end the resolutions with a good word. I want you to know that I set out to study the life of Jonathan Edwards in order to write a screenplay about Jonathan and Sarah's relationship with a backdrop of the First Great Awakening. And I realized this summer that yes, I had completed an outline for the screenplay, but I was in no way capable of finishing the screenplay this summer. And so what I wanted to do was have a completion of something. And so that's what these videos are, a completion of something. That these 70 resolutions would serve as a bit of an outline in which we could tell pieces of his life and that we could learn from him. So I hope you've enjoyed them. I certainly have enjoyed creating them. Thanks so much, and please subscribe below.